My next guest has over 25 years broadcast experience. He's held prominent positions in various industry organizations, including the International Broadcasters Idea Bank and the National Association of Broadcasters. He is active in many local, state, and national volunteer organizations and a founder of a nationally recognized summer mentoring program for aspiring broadcasters. With a rich history in broadcasting, he most recently served as the CEO of Newhoff Communications. Please welcome the new CEO of the RAB, Mike Hulvey.
Hey, Chachi, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the conversation.
And I appreciate taking the time. We are at the NAB at the ENCO booth. Thank you so much to ENCO for hosting us here. I know I'm going to credit our mutual friend Mike McVeigh, that you were drinking from a fire hose right now. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time.
Sure.
Really excited to hear about what you're doing now with the RAB and your new role. But before we jump into that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Well, my on-air light came on when I was 8 years old. I felt like I was so fortunate. I was at a high school basketball game, and I saw a radio broadcast for the first time. I mean, I had listened to radio, I'd listened to sports and music at age 8, but I had never seen a radio broadcast. And when I did, and I remember the night vividly, I looked up in the top row of this gymnasium, and there were two broadcasters sitting behind a table with a felt banner, headphones on, and it was I just looked up, and it's like, that's what I want to do. And from that moment forward, as crazy as that sounds, is from that moment forward, it's the only thing I wanted to do in my life, other than for a period of time be an astronaut, because we were going to the moon during that. And I thought that was cool, but I didn't do roller coasters well, so right back to radio.
Yeah. But being a broadcaster is a close second to being an astronaut.
I actually got to be very close friends with an astronaut who has been on 4 shuttle flights, who's actually from our home community. And so I've lived a little vicariously through him. He got to go to space. I got on the radio.
Well, the airwaves are traveling, the radio waves into space.
Actually gone farther than he has.
There you go. So at age 15, you begin helping a local sportscaster at WITY AM in Danville, Illinois.
Yep.
What was your first job there?
It was I knocked on the door. I engaged with this broadcaster, and it was so important that happened, because I have encouraged other broadcasters since then to do the same thing for others. I personally have done the same thing for others, because he saw my passion and interest, and he said, okay, I'll help. And what did I do? I helped set up remotes. I took equipment from point A to point B. I kept stats on a broadcast. Whatever I could do to be in the lane and associated with the radio station, I did. At the same time, on another station in the same community, there was a connection back to the high school that I attended, and they produced a weekly radio show. So I wrote and produced content for that show every week on another radio station while I was doing all this volunteer work. But it was the greatest gift I could have gotten at that time in my life. I got experience.
And you get, and a full-rounded experience. You're doing promotions, you're doing some prep, you're writing, producing. At that point, did you have aspirations to be on air?
Well, I had aspirations to be on air, but what I was noticing right away is all of the other things that were going on at the radio station. And you look at, and I'll use the sports term, my body of work, through my career, I really have done everything at a radio station with the exception of traffic. And what I've done with traffic through my career is to show appreciation for those who do it.
Very well said.
Because you gotta love puzzles, and I mean little pieces, all the same color puzzles.
It's like a big game of Tetris, for sure.
It is exactly that. Yeah. But and again, blessed with the fact that it started so young.
And then you get a job to be a producer for a weekly show on WDAN for Dick Van Dyke's first job, which was Dick Van Dyke's first job as well.
Yes, so Dick Van Dyke, Gene Hackman.
The Gene Hackman from
You may know those two guys. They and myself all started in the same place.
No kidding. And you guys are all started at WDAN?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and so
that's some really good company you kept.
Yeah, in our community, we come from a very small place. Danville, Illinois, is about 120 miles south of Chicago, about 70 miles due west of Indianapolis, and in that little town, it's been some amazing individuals. I'll throw some other names out. I mean, younger listeners may not appreciate, but Donald O'Connor is also from that community. Jerry Van Dyke certainly is from that community. a gentleman by the name of Bobby Short, who I will tell you, when Erica Farber found out that Bobby Short and I were from the same town, she just exploded because her and Bobby were friends.
Okay.
And he had a 30-year run at the Carlisle in New York.
No kidding.
And, world-renowned pianist and performer, all from the same place. And then
so it's just like a creative hub in the Midwest.
And it goes on and on. And one of the cool honors of my life, and I so appreciate it, is in like 2017, 2018, I was inducted into our local Wall of Fame at the high school. There's 53 of us, and I'm on there with Dick Van Dyke and Gene Hackman.
How cool is that?
As well as other folks. And from the entertainment world, there was another guy from our community by the name of Irving Azoff, and perhaps
of course,
you're
the
aware
big manager of the Eagles.
Yeah, he formed a little band called the Eagles, and ran this little company called Ticketmaster, and then he got bored with that and became, Live Nation. Well, he's from our community, and his sister.
This is the most incredible community ever.
Was my 7th grade teacher.
Get out.
Yeah, and so he grew up 2 blocks from the little radio station that started all of this. And Gene Hackman actually worked there was a little low-power television station tied to the radio station, and Hackman was a cameraman at WDAN television, but he worked in the same facility. And it was shortly
by the time
after,
you're growing, Gene Hackman's already a big deal by the time you're growing up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, everybody. All of those folks were a big deal.
And was that some inspiration for you?
I love Gene Hackman. I love his movies. He's always been my favorite actor. And it's interesting if you take this is not about my career, but you look at the place I came from, which I think is more interesting, and that is you look at the Van Dyke family, and Dick is soon to be 98 years old, still active.
Amazing.
And what a performer. I have a soon to be 10-year-old granddaughter, and she thinks Grandpa is cool because I've interacted with Dick Van Dyke. and it's Mary Poppins. But that's still relevant to a 10-year-old. Chachi. I mean, a 10-year-old. So they all came from the same place, and I don't know exactly why that was in the water, but it does provide inspiration in a lot of ways.
If anyone is listening from Danville, Illinois, apply to Benztown because it just sounds like there's some amazing talent in that city.
Absolutely.
So from there, you go on to work for Sangamon Broadcasting. Am I announcing that right?
Sangamon Broadcasting was a small company. It was owned by an amazing guy by the name of Shelby Harbison. And Shelby Harbison was my first real owner that I engaged with, and he was a Central Illinois broadcaster. He understood the value. I mean, I got this basic DNA put into my system very early on, and it's like, if you take care of your community. So, I'm just a kid, but if you take care of your community, you're aggressive with your local advertisers for their success, then you have a winning formula. That's the way you do it. So from my earliest days, that was a foundation of my broadcast growth.
It sounds like you got this just incredible education and some amazing mentors and obviously talent around you like Dick Van Dyke and Gene Hackman all coming from Danville. So you were able to immerse yourself in that and really pick up and succeed. We'll get into all your executive success, but before you got to your executive success, that gig that you had at Sangamon Broadcasting, you were a board op, and then you also started doing some sports announcing?
Yep. I got my feet wet in the sports world, started to pay attention to the other roles. That's when it started to look, what are the salespeople doing? What's happening over in the business office? How do all of these dots get connected? And one of the things that I tell kids and students today, never say no. Never say no. When given an opportunity, always say yes, as long as it's legal. Always say yes. And you look through my career path, it's all a series of yeses.
I think that's...
Even when it didn't make sense. It's like, oh, do you really want to do... No. I want the experience. I want the opportunity. I always said yes.
I think that's such a terrific piece of advice. I was fortunate enough to be on a panel yesterday for the BEA and speak to some of the students. And I think the more you can absorb from this business and the more aspects of the industry you understand, the more successful you're going to be. Yeah. And it's obviously been a great, incredible recipe for you. What kind of sports announcing were you doing? Basketball?
I started basketball and football, and I would do, again, I would do the games that the other guys didn't want to do.
Okay.
Oh, you got to be kidding. You want to do that? It's like back to any opportunity to learn, and we learn by doing, so you need to do. And
get those 10,000 hours.
You get those 10,000 hours. And, later in life, which we'll talk about in a minute, when we started this summer program for kids, one of the things that we teach young people, and we've had this 27-year run of a program where we've trained over 400 young broadcasters, but one of the things we talk about is the power of reps. And we had a guest speaker once who came in and wrote on the board, reps, reps, reps. The most important thing that you can do in your career and in your life is practice, 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 but it was referenced as reps, reps, reps.
I love that. I'm a fan of golf, and I started to watch Full Swing on Netflix, and you don't realize what these professional players are doing 8-10 hours a day. It is just rep after rep on the driving range.
You're not playing golf.
Exactly.
You're working.
So well put. So you get your first management position at Magic Broadcasting, which is in Danville, and you become the operations manager, the business manager. You're also doing local sales. So you've now kind of fully transitioned from more of the creative side as being an on-air announcer and doing some producing to now doing the business aspect of it. Did that come naturally, or was that a big learning curve for you?
Again, it was, somebody left. Who will do it? I raised my hand. We had opportunities where we needed to engage with local advertisers in some very specific ways. I raised my hand. And again, I had a mixed bag of things that I was doing, but at a time in my life where it was like I just keep feeding, keep feeding, because I know it's going to pay off. I know there's a reason why this is happening.
It sounds like you're naturally curious. Was that just kind of what your parents instilled in you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they rolled their eyes, and, God bless them. My mother has since passed, but she was a great supporter. But yes, curiosity. I don't know if you've done strength finders.
Yeah, I have. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Context is one of my top 5.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Achiever.
I think I was a woo.
Yeah. Right. No, right. We're talking the same language. Positivity was number 1. Achiever, and then context. I want to know why. I'd like to know why it provides perspective, but I'm not afraid to raise my hand and volunteer for things and ask questions. And again, at that time in my career, it was playing a huge role. And I really didn't know what it was setting up for. I just knew it couldn't hurt.
You have had prior to your brand new position, which we're going to get into here in a few minutes, you had a remarkable career with Neuhoff Broadcasting.
Yes.
And you started off with them at DAN, WDNL, and WRHK as the VP and General Manager. And how did you first get introduced to the Neuhoff family?
So Jeff Neuhoff, legendary broadcaster. I mean, the Jeff's was the son of Roger Neuhoff, who back in the day when you had a group of markets of about 12, which was about the largest that you could grow. Eastern Broadcasting was Roger's company. His son Jeff, had an interest in what his dad had done. He started out he bought a market from his father in Springfield, Illinois, and he's 35 years old, and he's ready to buy his first group, on his own.
Wow.
And so in Danville, again, and the weird thing is, you can tell, I have a very unusual story, is that it connects into a place that it's always been connected to. I haven't moved 28 times. I haven't done all those things. It just started to happen.
And I think that's a testament to you to be able to stay in one community and have that kind of success, because you had to be really good at what you did. Otherwise, the word would have been out.
No, yeah, it's next. But when Jeff, and I loved his story. So he's 35 years old. He's a young guy. He's a very successful father. But it was really important to Jeff to be able to do it on his own and to prove his success. And so he buys his first independent market, adding it to what his holdings were in Springfield, Illinois. So now he has 2 Central Illinois markets. And I remember the first day he came in, well, who does this? And they said, well, Mike does. Well, who does that? Well, Mike does. Well, what else does this Mike do? We talk, and we have an instant bond. And it was a short time later that he came to me, and I was 26 years old, and he said, you know what? I'm going to make you the manager of the radio station. Here's what I expect. Whatever you need to accomplish that goal, let me know. but I trust you. Go do it. And Chachi, I'd never done it before.
That's a tremendous amount of responsibility. You're also very young at this time.
No, I was young. I was young. I started young. I had children young. I was married young. But like there was no net, like there was no safety net. This is going to work.
That was part of the adrenaline, though, I'm sure, in the excitement. It actually is kind of reminiscent to me in the relationship that you had with the Newhoff family. It's very similar to what Peter Smythe had with the Borders family.
No, very much.
And to work with, someone for that long, how was that? I mean, I'm sure that there was a lot of excitement, but it also could be almost like you're working with a family member yourself. I mean, you were kind of like a Newhoff.
I became a Newhoff, but my last name was clearly Hulvey. But then, as we grew, so we grew from this 2 stations, and then we added some television, and then we added more radio, and then, as things evolved, and then my responsibilities evolved, to multiple markets and leading a team, and it goes back to one thing: people. And you lead a team, and you work with a team, and you work hard, and you don't want to let them down. And for a young leader, it's like, I need to learn more and more and more.
Sure.
And I didn't go to college. I mean, Erica Farber and I have a similar story. I didn't go to college. You don't see an education break in my timeline. Part of my story is I'm dyslexic.
No kidding.
And so early on when you're dyslexic in the 70s, it's different than you're dyslexic in 2024.
Right.
My father was actually the superintendent of our school district, so it wasn't like we weren't connected to opportunities, but it was just different. And one thing since my on-air light came on at 8, it's like, I know what I want to do. And like this other thing that I had to deal with was unaffected didn't play into the fact that I could do radio. I could figure out how to do radio.
That's a real inspirational story. How did you overcome that?
I deal with it every day. I deal with it today. But I am inspired by it. I consider it my great superpower. Because and you look down the list of people who are dyslexic, especially great business leaders and politicians and coaches, and I love leadership lessons. People who are dyslexic, what we get that you don't have. The gift that I have that you don't have is I have to find ways to do things differently than other people do. So, like case in point, personally, I have an overachieving sister. She's the director of retinal photography at the University of Chicago Medical Center. She's brilliant.
Impressive.
She's world class in her field. I have a little brother who's brilliant and smart and just an amazing guy, and they sailed through school. Like, I didn't. I had other challenges that I had to deal with, but I had one thing they didn't, and that is I knew how to do things that they couldn't do. And I also knew where I was going. I had my North Star set, and I was going there. And I found people along the way: Jeff Newhoff, Roger Newhoff, Beth Newhoff, the team that I worked with, the folks early on in my career who like the guy that answered the door when I was 14 years old. He's still a mentor to this day.
Oh, that's so cool.
He's approaching 70 years old in this industry, and
in some ways that dyslexia forced you to be creative.
No, absolutely. You don't have a choice. And then it's part I referenced earlier. I flew without a net. Okay, I flew without a net, and so failure was not an option, Chachi. It just wasn't an option.
That's an awesome lesson in and of itself, and the fact that you took a disability and you were able to turn it into something so positive and to succeed, and you got your radio MBA really on the job, and
right.
that's stressful. That's like going to the moon the first time. back to being an astronaut. So you start. Your career at Newhoff really becomes a rocket ship. You start as at those stations that I mentioned earlier: DAN, DNL, RHK, as the VP General Manager. From there, you then start working in Grand Island, and then you've got some.
Actually, Grand Island was an ownership opportunity. So Jeff Newhoff and I bought Grand Island.
Oh, so you've been an owner as well.
Yes.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, so KSYZ, it was a minority owner in KSYZ FM radio in Grand Island, Nebraska. And this was an opportunity that Jeff brought to me. At some point, the phone's ringing and there's other opportunities and people come and they're talking, and then but I knew I had this connection to Jeff, and I said, you know what, I don't want to leave. And I want to find reasons to stay and grow. And I said I would like to be an owner. And so we found together an opportunity to do that, and that happened with a radio station in Grand Island, Nebraska.
You've
And
got an
that's-
entrepreneurial side to you then as well. And I can see that you're someone who likes taking some risks, and you obviously dove in at a very early age. Did you move to Grand Island?
No,
or
we
you
just,
stayed-
we operated it. We
I
had a
see.
team there, and at the same time, we're operating the Newhoff company. Then we also had a separate company in Nebraska.
And then what was that like for you as now your role is growing and you're in charge of more markets than just outside of, or
Right.
just Danville? How did that kind of change your day-to-day?
You know, it goes back to I wanted to learn more. I wanted to, like, the Nebraska market. I wanted to know, they did some really cool stuff, and they had some amazing success. I wanted to know how they did it. You know, we have meetings, and they were talking. I said, no, I really want to know how you did that. Like, how did that happen? You know, like, what goes into creating that success? And that was exciting. And then as we grew in our Newhoff markets, I can't help it. I go on, and Erica knew this, by the way, because as we were advancing towards the RAB role, during the interim period between announcement and when I actually started, which was the 1st of April, Erica kept basically the team away from me because she goes, I know something about you. You dip your toe in something and you're just going to jump in, and you're not ready for that because you have other responsibilities
Sure.
that you're doing. So I'm going to keep you from jumping in. But with the other Newhoff markets, I tried to jump into all the markets, not to be in the way, but to learn.
To just understand it, and each one of
Right.
these different communities have different nuances, and to understand the staff.
And their successes and how they do it. And why is one staff successful at this particular thing in one market, but and this other staff struggles in that, but they super excel in this other area, and the market is super exceeding in this, they can't get started in the other, and trying to figure that out.
And then you also, at this point, you guys add television stations.
Correct. So the Newhoffs added television, and that was part of my purview then to oversee television. So that became a whole new, challenge, but it was a great opportunity. And so I got to engage on the television side. And first you are like, hey, you know what? You're a radio guy.
Right.
And guess what? Television is not radio with
Yeah.
pictures. It is different. And, in my way, I would come back to our team in television. It's like, well, here are some really great ideas. Well, that's a radio idea. I said, no. It's a local media idea. It's a local community activation idea. It can work here.
I remember, so my first job was at KFMB in San Diego, Midwest Television, and they had
Yeah.
a TV, an FM, and an AM, and there was this kind of line that the radio people didn't cross into television, and there was definitely a difference. You felt you walked over into the TV side, and it was much more serious.
Definitely culturally different.
Yeah.
But you know what? We never gave up. We just kept moving through it, and we learned. We on the radio side learned from our television, brothers and sisters, and likewise, and again, some really nice success stories out of that.
Where are you learning leadership? Are you reading books? How are you? Because you are naturally effervescent, I think is the word. You are just a natural leader, but you also, I'm sure, had to get an education on that because you're overseeing multiple radio stations. I'm sure several hundred employees. How did you learn and were able to succeed?
I
with
love
that?
leadership. I mean, I love to study great leaders. I happen to think coaches and politicians are leaders, and then again, you think about the impact of someone, and this is like someone in an organization who quietly leads in a very profound way. They don't have the title, there's no responsibility, but they understand their impact in a smaller team, and they do things that maybe have greater impact than the big leadership. So finding stories like that. Okay, so I'm dyslexic. Reading, I read all the time, but to sit down with a book and to go through 300 pages of text, by the way my brain is wired, and that's what it's just a wiring situation, that's not successful for me. I can't get the information in a useful way. But audio, I have been reading large books and heavy material since I was a kid. At first, it was a cassette tape and a cassette tape recorder next to my bed. I had a radio and I had a cassette tape recorder with a book.
Interesting.
And I would listen and read. Now it's my iPhone and
Sure.
Audible, and I have a stack of CDs of some really, intense stuff that I learn from and engage with. And so I just found, again, it goes back to dyslexia. It teaches you different ways to do things. And so I access great leaders. Jim Collins is one of my favorites. Simon
Okay.
Sinek.
Yeah, Jim. Is it not how I built this? Jim Collins.
Jim Collins is Good to
Built
Great.
to Last or Good to Great.
No,
Built to-
Built to Last, Good to Great.
Yeah.
Why the Mighty Fall?
Yes.
All these concepts and all audio, audio. Again, Simon Sinek. I've read everything.
The
all
method
audio.
it certainly worked for you. You've figured out
Yeah.
it's incredibly impressive. And
I
you're
drive
now,
my wife crazy. We're on a trip. I said, I got some Simon Sinek. Oh no, we're not listening to Simon Sinek. We're going to find country radio stations along our path, and we're going to listen to that. Yes, dear.
So you own part of a radio station with the Newhoff family in Grand Island. You are overseeing Newhoff Communications. You guys have multiple radio, 3 television stations, and you're tapped now to be the COO. So now, you are in the executive suite. What was that moment like?
So the moment that was like is when Jeff Newhoff died.
Oh, I did not.
So
realize
Jeff
that.
Newhoff died on July 20th of 2012.
He must have been pretty young. This
59 years old.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear
He
that.
passed away in front of his wife, who was Beth, and it was a traumatic experience.
And I am so sorry. You
Yeah.
guys were incredibly close.
Brothers in a lot of ways, and mentors besides being boss or business partners. And Jeff passes away, and Beth steps into the CEO role after Jeff's passing. And Jeff's father asks Beth and I, this is what I expect. Beth is going to do this, you're going to do that, and you're going to be successful together.
Wow.
And so I went from a vice president of operations or whatever, I'm not even a big title guy, but did that role to COO as Beth Newhoff's partner, as CEO of the family business, and to help her. And she had been on the buy side. She had been a very successful national rep. She had run offices for McGavran Guild. So she knew that side of the business. She did not know the operations side, and she just dove into the pool while grieving the loss of her husband.
Oh, man.
And then together we went on this journey, and we worked together for 10 years until she retired, and then I took over as CEO.
What a remarkable story. So you're grieving practically the loss of a brother.
Yeah.
She's grieving the loss of her biological brother. And now
No,
you guys,
her husband.
I'm sorry, her husband. My
Yeah,
apologies.
yeah.
Her husband. Let's pick that up. 3, 2, 1. What an incredibly heavy experience. You're grieving practically the loss of a brother, and Beth is grieving the loss of her husband. And was it unexpected?
Absolutely.
Oh man! And
Yeah.
you guys now are tasked with running this large operation, and so it's certainly incredibly emotional, and you want to succeed on his behalf.
Right.
But
we're not going to let him down.
But you're also mourning, and
Yeah.
it sounds like. So did Beth at that point? Did she come back into the business because she was working?
Yeah, so she was not working in the business. She was doing. She was active because she has such a great brain, and we were tapping her for things, and then she jumped in on the operation side, and did a fabulous job. I mean, she learned both radio and television, and we dove in on big problems that we were facing and dealing with, and the credit also goes, Chachi, to the team. I mean, the entire team of professionals in the company, because no one was going to let Jeff Newhoff down. They weren't going to let his mom and dad down, who were still with us at that point, but they certainly weren't going to let the memory of Jeff Newhoff down, and they weren't going to let Beth down. I mean, it was. You talk about leadership lessons. You don't teach this stuff. I didn't go to business school, but I'm sure they don't teach this stuff at business school.
That is, thank you for sharing that. It's an incredible story, and I'm sure he would be looking down so proud of what you guys built, and just the reputation that the company has. I can tell you, just being in the industry for as long as I have, the Newhoff family and Newhoff Broadcasting is just looked upon as really this beacon of broadcasting, and I know that you guys worked incredibly hard to serve your communities. It reminds me a lot of, I hold certain broadcasters I've got so much respect for, like Jeff Simolian and Jeff Warsaw, and community's really important.
You picked two good ones there.
Yeah. Well, they're great guys, and incredibly talented and just wonderful leaders. So the Newhoff family makes the decision, just I guess about 6 months ago, that they're going to finally sell the radio stations. I mean, that must have been emotionally difficult.
Yeah, that when I had a running head start to it once we finally talked to the staff about it, but I had time to get used to the idea. And when Beth retired in 2021, and I took over as the president of the company once Beth retired, but I knew what the family wanted to do. We got to the third generation. It was time. 70 years, it was time. You know, Roger had an amazing run, Jeff, and then Beth, and then the work that we all did together. It was time. So I asked the family for permission to do it my way. And we laid a process out and in a very thoughtful way, because these stations that were the Neuhoff stations, the brands and the communities and the people they mean so much to me. They meant something to them too. But they're very important. I mean, they're very, very important. And I wanted it done in a certain way. And the family was very supportive, and I appreciate that. And then we began a process that has led to all of the stations. We have signed agreements on all of the markets. Everyone's ending up with a wonderful new partner. We have the stations are going to be in good hands. The markets are going to be in good hands. The people who are acquiring the Neuhoff stations value our people. I mean, value our people. They love what we've done. And again, things will be different. That's just how the RAB will be different. You know, that's just what happens.
Sure.
But you start from a position of respect and appreciation and understanding and value. And so all of those things have been accomplished. And so we'll have some closings over the course of the next 3 months or so with the Neuhoffs. And again, Steve Wexler was brought in.
Love Steve Wexler.
Steve Wexler
We worked with him
best.
back when he was at Journal. And
Yes.
Good man.
Yeah,
and
so
I love anyone who's got the embroidered. Does
Yes.
he sell these embroidered sleeves? Yeah,
it's his thing.
Yeah.
But I had personally reached out to Wex, and I shared with him. He was unaware that the RAB situation was going to happen, and I shared with him. And again, this was in the fall of last year. Would you do me a favor? And we're friends. I said, would you finish my work?
That's really touching.
And he said yes, and he integrated with our team early on, and he and I are very similar, but he's finishing my work, and that's the best way I can describe it.
Well, what a tremendous person to do that, but it also, I think, is really a testimonial to you and to the Neuhoff family that you wanted to make sure that you had such a capable executive like Wex to transition these properties into their new ownership, and I'm sure it will hopefully give them a much more successful transition as opposed to just stepping away. Sure.
And the team.
Sure.
But one thing that's fun about this is Wex is learning things that he never knew. You know, running the big markets and the big stations. You're like, wow. He's done a terrific job. I mean, I love our little conversations or a text message. I had no idea, little things like that. So it's fun. It's fun.
So the RAB, I know you've been heavily involved as a board member, but how does the position of running the RAB come about?
So if I can have a Mike story for you.
Please.
And again, from a leadership perspective, and this is a story that I will share with students moving forward. In 1999, Chachi, you and I would not be sitting here today if in 1999 I didn't send an email. In 1999, I sent an email to Wayne Cornell, Radio Wayne.
Okay.
I had come from I had attended an event in 1999 that the RAB put on, and I had some suggestions about how the event could be improved. And so I send Radio Wayne an email. Now, can imagine a 1999 email and what that sounded like, on my 14.0 baud, modem. But anyway, so I sent him an email. He replies back. We have an exchange. By the way, I still have that email. I saved it. From that email, he invited me to join the Sales Advisory Committee of the RAB. From that first meeting that I went to of the Sales Advisory Committee, I ended up being invited to join the International Broadcasters Idea Bank. From that first meeting, I also made a connection with broadcasters that ultimately led to an invitation some years later to join the RAB board. From the RAB board invitation, I was invited to join the executive committee. From my participation on the executive committee, I was invited a couple years later to become an officer. And then you get in the queue. It's like the Rotary Club, you get in the queue. And from that invitation, ultimately, I was the board chair of the RAB during the pandemic.
Okay.
It was also the same time that Erica got sick.
Got it.
And so during my leadership time of the RAB Board of Directors, there was a period of time where I also was the interim CEO.
So you've been part of the RAB for 25 years.
Yes, sir.
Back to getting in your reps, you know that organization and have really done and going into being as well-rounded as possible and doing every part of the radio station other than traffic.
Yeah.
That's what it's been for you at the RAB.
That's it.
That's a fantastic story.
But I come in not knowing anything. Like, because if you're a board member of an organization, but then you get asked to run the organization, it's different. And so, this is very early on, and I'll tell you the first commitment that I made to our team, and as you can tell, I'm a team-first person. I made a commitment to the RAB team, and that is every member of the team, regardless of function, will have a one-on-one meeting with me at the earliest possible time of my tenure as CEO. And I started April 1st, and this past Friday at 11 o'clock, I concluded my last interview. And it wasn't an interview, just a discussion meeting with the last staff member that I had not talked to.
And you did that that quickly and ahead of NAB, and I just looked at your schedule, which is stacked every 30 minutes.
Yes, but it was so important because I knew once we get to NAB, and then after NAB we're going to be busy. Then we got Radio Mercury Awards, and then we've got industry activities and outreach with advertisers, and just the normal flow of being the CEO of this amazing organization. I didn't want to get stuck not having had the opportunity to engage with the most important people to the successful functioning of the RAB, and that's the staff.
I love your passion for the industry. I love the leadership and the service to the community and your partnership with the Newhoff family for so many years. The RAB in this role, I think, is so incredibly important, and the way that the industry ultimately is reflected to the advertising community and into this world that we are just shifting and changing as quick as it is with AI and all these different places for advertisers to spend their money. I'm really interested in what's going to happen. I know right now in Washington they're talking about a privacy bill. Where do you see broadcast radio in particular over the next few years? How do you see things kind of evolving, and what's really going to be your mission now with the RAB as you have taken over the leadership?
Great question. I've had a lot of broadcasters say, what are the first three things you're going to do? And I said, well, when you go to the doctor, so you go into the doctor's office and you see your doctor and you have a relationship with your doctor, and the first thing your doctor says to you is she hands you a prescription for medication, and you didn't have a discussion. It's called malpractice. Yeah.
It's very well put.
Right? So as I come into the RAB, I was very clear with the board and myself and our team, and that is I have three objectives. The first objective is a period of what I call engagement. And that is, yes, I've been involved. Yes, I've been on committees. Yes, I've been a broadcaster. Yes, I've used the RAB. But I'm going to use this early time to engage with our stakeholders, with our team, with our board, to understand exactly where I have ideas of where I want to go, but it's malpractice if I don't engage, everyone, relatively everyone, but, all facets of the RAB universe. Then we're going to go through a period of alignment. And again, this is not taking forever, but my focus is engage, align, and then activate. And, Erica has built the RAB house on rock.
She's
on rock.
Yeah. She's amazing, and I want to thank Erica for just the amazing service. She's been a good friend of mine for years and years, back from the R&R days, and she's been such a supporter of Benztown. And anything that I want to extend, anything we can do for the RAB, we gratefully appreciate the partnership, and very grateful for everything your team does. You had mentioned Jim Collins and talking about Erica about building this strong foundation. Jim Collins talks about Built to Last, I think. About this big, gigantic stone wheel.
The flywheel.
The flywheel, yes. Yeah. And you've got to have everyone's hand on it to get it to move, because one person...
it moves slow at first.
Yes, exactly.
And then with momentum and effort of a team, it begins to spin faster and faster and faster. You're right.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you're looking to do. Well, thank you for taking on that role. I know it is a
welcome.
stressful role. I know it is not an easy role. You deal with some very strong executives and a lot of different opinions and so forth. But I think the great thing about this industry is we all have one common cause, and we want to see it succeed. We want to see our advertisers succeed. And I wish you all the luck. I want to jump in on a couple of just some of your personal causes before we wrap this up. But I know you've got a passion for your summer mentoring program, and you've trained over 400 students. Tell me a little bit about that.
It is my greatest passion beyond my family and broadcasting, and it is a program that we started in 1996. It's a week-long summer camp which is designed to train broadcasters of the future. And we build it on the basis of what would we want, and I did this with a friend of mine, a broadcast friend of mine. What would we want to have done when we were 14 if given the chance to be exposed to this wonderful thing called radio? And it's a bit of a sports bent because I got my on-air light, if you will, through the sports thing. And so we created a week-long hands-on program where the kids learn interviewing skills. They learn to write. They learn to video edit now. These are going on now. We use social media, play-by-play, public address. But the very first thing we do on our summer program is public speaking. So the first session of the first day, we get the kids up in front of the group, and we begin to teach the kids how to articulate an idea and share a thought and not be completely petrified to be up in front of a group of strangers. And it is a skill that they will take with them the rest of their life.
That sounds terrific. And you do that every summer?
Now that I'm full-time at RAB, I will support our program, but individuals who have gone through our camp in the past are now are running it this summer. So it will certainly live on. And we've had some amazing success stories of the kids that have come through the program who are in the business now or who have used the business. We've had kids that have gone through to become clients. I love it.
That's great.
The gentleman that ran our largest revenue market for a number of years started with us when he was 10 as a participant in our camp.
No kidding. Now he's a market manager.
Well, now he's a client.
Oh, a client.
He was the sales manager of our largest revenue generating market. And then at some point he decided, the entrepreneurial spirit is really driving me. So he opened up his insurance office, and now he's on the radio every day. He became a client. Yeah. Bless him.
Perfect testimonial for radio.
Yeah, but it's a way to give back. And again, go back to that little 14-year-old kid who went and knocked on the door of the local radio station, and a broadcaster put his arm around me and said, "You know what? You can do this." And so that's what the camp is about, and that's why I give a lot of time to it.
And what's the name of the camp?
It is it's the Newhoff Media Sports Media Camp for Kids is what we call it. But we teach them a lot more than just sports media, and leadership is really a part of that. I'll give you one quick story. I don't know we've gone long in your podcast.
This is wonderful, and I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate the opportunity. So we always try to bring in guest speakers, and before, early on you had to actually show up, and we've had amazing people who would get in their car and drive and show up and engage with our students. And then when technology came around, it was easier, but we had the social media director of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And every speaker there's some connection to me or along the, I know a lot of people. So, and everyone when asked to help kids always says yes. I've only had one person ever say no. It was a newspaper writer.
Really?
Oh yeah, he said no. This was early on before it
what a
it
curmudgeon.
became. No, yeah. I would say his name, but I hate to be that. Anyway, he said no once, and then I found out that he played golf with a local, a college football coach later that week. Not in his town. He wrote for one of the papers in Chicago, and he couldn't come down and engage with our kids, but he could go play golf. So, and then later when this camp took off, and he goes, "Hey, Mike, I really want to help. Whatever I can do." I said,
right.
You had your chance.
Yeah, unreal.
Anyway, but with the social media, his name is Zach Gallia. He is now the social media director for the Pirates, but at the time he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he came in and he was on video, or he was on phone on a conference call talking to the kids, but he shared a leadership story, which was impactful to the kids and your audience. And that was, he said, the first week that he worked for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a pretty good organization, right?
Sure, yeah.
He's a Pittsburgh kid, so he's like his dream job. Like he's inside the four walls
Right.
of the Steelers building. You know, it's a big deal. And he's doing something that probably at the time a lot of people didn't quite know. This was early on in social media. So he walks into the bathroom. This is the story. He walks into the bathroom of the Steelers complex, and at the sink in the counter of the bathroom is Mr. Rooney,
Wow.
the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what do you think he was doing?
Washing his hands.
He had a towel and he was wiping down the counter.
No.
And Zach, again, this is Zach telling the story. Zach says, Mr. Rooney, I mean, I can do that for you. I mean, he walks in and there's the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, NFL owner. He's wiping down the countertops. And Mr. Rooney, who he had not met yet, because it was his first week, calls him by name, soft skill alert, leadership alert, calls him by name, and he says, in this organization, there is no job too big or small for any member of our team.
That is
the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That is a phenomenal lesson.
So he told that to our kids, and I still share that story. I'm sharing it with you today. But to our young people, it's like, listen, never get too big for your britches. I love the humility of that, and that's a great leadership story.
Yeah, an absolute great leadership story. Will you try to tie in the summer camp, do you think, with the National Talent System?
I have a dream. I mean, I have a dream to see. I'm not making light of the statement. I mean, that quote, but I do have a dream to see in this country, this rejuvenation of young people who are interested in becoming broadcasters. For 27 years, that's what I dedicated a week every summer and lots of time in preparation. I want to turn the volume up on that. And we have this amazing program, with the NRTS.
Sure.
It has so much growth opportunity, and we have just to be able to connect the opportunity to the students. And so the answer is, yeah, I have big ideas.
I love seeing the enthusiasm from students, and I think it's such a shot of adrenaline for the industry. As I mentioned yesterday when I was speaking to the BEA, some of the terrific questions that they were asking me and the engagement, and they're excited in all aspects of it. Sports is a big topic, as you can imagine, and news. I think there's a real passion for the younger generation to have some news sources that are more trustworthy. And it was really interesting to take some of their questions and see what they were interested in. But I feel that passion, and I can tell you that Heather Brooks told me that there more people applied this year than in the last several years.
That's
so
right. And again, that's something. It's an Erica legacy.
Yeah.
And we want to turn the volume up on that.
I am going to leave you with one more bonus question. Advice for radio people who are wondering about the future.
The future is bright. Remember, the definition of radio has changed. And it didn't just change today. In the past, radio was an appliance. My daughter referenced it like a toaster the other day. Well, Dad, the only thing that hasn't changed in 40 years is a toaster. You toast your bread the same way. And the radio used to sit on the counter like a toaster. It's a great analogy.
It really is.
But that was when it was a one-way street. Radio is no longer a one-way street. It's a 8-lane highway because of technology, innovation, young natives to the innovative world. Radio now is so much more. And we have 100%, if you look at the data, we have 100% penetration in the car still. Even with all of the other things that may get in the way, that relationship that listeners have with their radio still remains very, very impactful. As long as we continue to understand the value of local, I don't care if you're in New York City, Schenectady, Danville, Illinois, never lose sight of the value of your local relationship. It's the one thing, and as a radio seller, yes, there's other folks who are selling digital out of their basement or wherever they are at on top of other professional organizations in the smaller markets. But your relationship with a local advertiser cannot be duplicated. They're not duplicating that. So if we take care of our local content, we understand the value of local, we continue to be aggressive with those local relationships. And to know that radio is now an 8-lane superhighway, not a one-way street, leading from this appliance on the counter, at my grandmother's house. It's bright. It's bright for it's bright for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Radio's not dying. It's not. It's evolving.
Michael, I am so incredibly happy that you are now leading the RAB.
Well,
thank you to Erica for her amazing stewardship. You are really an impressive human being. Really
Would
enjoyed
you call my
this.
wife, please? Yeah. A reminder of that.